Welcome to LowCodeCon 2022. My name is Michael Cares. I'm your host. We're celebrating our second year with this global event focused on all things low code and open source. Our purpose is to bring together the low code and open source community to share the experience and knowledge of thought leaders and experts from around the world. As the host company and organizer of the event, AOT Technologies is committed to the values of low code and open source, so much so that we developed our own free open source low code development platform, formsflow.ai, which is core to our vision of democratized development for government and business. I'd like to present to you today Chris Etheredge. Chris is presenting on how coders and citizen developers unite to drive excellence with Gen2 RPA and formsflow.ai. Chris is the VP of Sales and Customer Operations at Robocorp, and he has more than 25 years of sales experience driving complex transformational projects using a value-based approach at both high-growth startups and established industry players. He's got a strong track record of building and developing teams that deliver results in enterprise software space, and he believes the industry has only begun to scratch the surface of what's possible with robotic process automation. I'll turn it over to you, Chris.
Great. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, everyone, for being here and giving us this opportunity to share what we're doing at Robocorp. As Michael mentioned, my name is Chris Etheredge, and I lead our go-to-market operations here at Robocorp, and excited to share with you a little bit about our story and what we're doing in the market and what we're doing to democratize access to robotic process automation and the value that that can unlock for organizations. So I'll walk us through a brief deck here. We'll talk a little bit about what is RPA. I don't want to make the assumption that everyone is familiar with this technology and space in the market. But then I'll go into what makes Robocorp different and how we're leveraging vibrant open source ecosystems and partnering with people like AOT Technologies and Formsflow AI to help users unlock the value of process automation. We'll even show a quick demo at the end of the two solutions working together, and then we'll wrap it up for any questions and any follow-up we have beyond that. So let's get started. So RPA, robotic process automation, it's been the fastest growing segment of enterprise software for the last couple of years, according to Gartner, and projected to continue to maintain that status going forward. And really, it's kind of a technology solution coming along at the right time. It's the idea of how do I create these robot workers, these digital assets, or bots, as people will call them, to take on manual, repetitive tasks that humans often have to do across or within software systems. And, all of us, whether it's a government entity or a commercial organization, right, are dealing with, this chart here on the right where expectations and the amount of work is done nothing but gone up and to the right. The number of applications that you're dealing with in your organizations continues to increase. And human capital, is at best flat right now. I talk to a lot of leaders that are dealing with open headcount positions that they simply can't fill. So it's often a situation of how do I do more with less? Then you throw on top of that situation a global pandemic a couple of years ago where the way of working changed dramatically, and the adoption of these bots increased in line with that because people were looking for how do I introduce business resiliency into my organization through technology. And so when you think of RPA, it's all around, how do I complete key business processes faster, do it with higher accuracy, and give that concept of resilience. And then ultimately, it's about freeing up my human assets to do more high value tasks and not be, consumed with the boring stuff on a day-to-day basis, these manual repetitive tasks that all organizations have within their operations. And free them up to do things that can add value to your business and your organization. When you think about these digital workers, at the end of the day, they're software scripts, right? But they can do a lot, right? It's everything from logging in and interacting with enterprise applications like an SAP or an Oracle EBS, extracting data from documents, quote unquote, reading them and taking that and putting it into another format or another system down the line, reading and writing the databases, pulling data off of the internet, manipulating data, opening, creating, reading emails, et cetera, right? The possibilities are really, really broad on the types of tasks that these bots can take on. And we see it applied in a really broad array of use cases. And what you have to think about with, if you're looking at RPA for the first time is, how complex is the process? Is it something that, if it's something that I did on a day-to-day basis, if I went on vacation tomorrow, could I write it out for someone to take on that task while I'm out and continue to complete it? If it's documentable, it's often automatable across software systems. And so it's just one of those things to kind of think about, and where is the value in it, and what kind of business impact could you get from automating this process? What would that free up your people to be able to go and do instead of those tasks? And often it starts in places like finance and accounting. There's lots of kind of rote tasks that people in those parts of the organization have to do around month-end reporting, processing invoices, compliance reporting and auditing, et cetera. It goes on. And you think about HR and talent onboarding and provisioning new employees, et cetera. There's cases in IT, right, around master data management type use cases. There's things on the customer service side where bots can be used to go and pull information into a customer interaction or take action on something that happens in a customer service situation. It really, really is, up to the limits of your imagination on where this can be applied. But these are just some of the more common areas where we see people putting focus. And, you see this, right? And it's no wonder with all of these possibilities for automation and the opportunities that are out there in front of organizations, why it's been such a hot space and why there's been so much traction. And there's a handful of kind of first generation companies that brought the technology to bear on this. And what they basically did is they built these bots that would basically mimic the human interaction at the user interface level of the application. So basically, it's almost like a recorded playback of you completing a task across a few different software systems, and the bot would take it on. And then there are other ways to augment it, obviously. But we brought our company to market because when we talk to people that are leading digital transformation efforts at organizations, we hear a common set of challenges from them. I rarely get pushed back on this when we're talking to people that are in the consulting world or in the actual day-to-day job doing this for organizations of all sizes. There's big challenges around the rigidity and the inflexibility of the licensing and infrastructure costs just to get started. And then especially when you get to scale, we talk to organizations all the time that have hundreds of bots and thousands of bots deployed. And they're like, we're still just getting started. We've been on the journey for multiple years, but now we're looking at what it's going to take to ultimately get there from a total cost of ownership standpoint. And it becomes prohibitive for them getting to scale. The other thing is the nature of that technology that I described, where the bot is basically mimicking human interaction across a user interface, is fraught with fragility. The bots break a lot. A button moves on the screen. Salesforce updates over the weekend. It breaks all the bots because buttons move, things change and move around the screen. That requires a great deal of overhead from a maintenance standpoint to go and remediate that problem within the bots that you've already built and then get them back up and running again and completing the tasks that you automated. And, a lot of these initial projects were sold on the promise of citizen development and low-code solutions will give you the ability for anyone to build a bot. And there's taglines like a bot for every worker out there, and you can build and automate your own tasks freely. And while there's absolutely use cases that are fit for that, once you get beyond the low-hanging fruit, though, we see people run into a lot of challenges, right? And you end up having to get professional developers involved to be able to extend these proprietary low-code platforms to be able to automate more mission critical, more complex types of tasks. And that was really the genesis of us as a company a few years ago, was a realization that, number one, there wasn't a viable open source enterprise grade solution out there. And there wasn't something that could serve the needs of organizations across all personas, the developer as well as the citizen developer or a business analyst type person that has less of a technical background. And so that's the journey that we're on as an organization, and we're getting great traction in the market with this approach. And I'm excited to share more with you about what we're doing. So if you look at us, what we have done is, we've brought a very powerful open source community to bear, and I'm going to walk you through the components of that in detail here in a second. But we've gone beyond the traditional robotic process automation approach in that we open up broader possibilities of how you can go about architecting and developing these automations beyond just the user interface and mimicking a human's interaction, right? And so it's not your standard kind of desktop automation approach. And then we've also, we very much realized that there is a whole broader set of tooling out there to enable a digital transformation beyond just us or any RPA tool. And you need to be able to fit nicely within that broader ecosystem, whether those are AI ML tools that you want to incorporate into your use cases to extend the capabilities of the bots. We try to make it very easy on a use case by use case basis to allow people to incorporate those things into bots. Think of intelligent document processing or OCR type technology from the cloud vendors, or a lot of these really exciting startups that are emerging on the space with new and a differentiated AI technology for quote unquote reading documents and being able to extract that data and allow the bots to take action on it. A lot of organizations have invested in BPM and iPaaS tools for API to API integration, and that's great. And we support that. We support integration into those tools and then extend them with the functionality where, hey, some applications that are alive and well and not go anywhere don't have an API, or that's not a robust enough one to be able to accomplish this. We try to sit right there in the middle of that and be that digital backbone so that you incorporate best-in-class technology around Robocorp for your overall digital transformation efforts. And the way we're doing that is with open source, right? We have brought a very modern set of development tooling that now enables everything from a low code to a pro code approach, all in the same framework. And we started out with serving the developer. We said, look, we need to serve the people that are actually out there having to build these bots at scale and give them purpose-built tooling. And then we started layering abstraction on top of it to make it more accessible to non-developer personas. And I'll walk you through how we've done that. But at the basis of everything we do is Python. And so massive ecosystem of innovation that we're able to leverage and bring to bear on this market. And it gives us the ability to go beyond the traditional RPA approach of UI-based automation and give the developers the choice of, hey, is there an opportunity to go against the building blocks of the UI, or go against an API, or even go down to the data layer when I'm building these digital workers. And so it gives you a lot of flexibility and a lot of power in how you can go and design and deliver these automations. But then once you've got the bots built, the real challenge is the operation of the bots on an ongoing basis, right? Being able to govern them in a secure fashion and monitor operations to make sure that you're delivering on the SLAs you promised to your business stakeholders. We've done that by building from the ground up a cloud native orchestration layer that we call a control room that we deliver as SaaS for our clients, and we manage that on their behalf. It gives them the flexibility to have cloud elasticity with RPA, but while maintaining adherence to their InfoSec guidelines. So our bots can run wherever they need to, right? On-prem, in the cloud, or even a combination of the two based on the systems you're automating against and your InfoSec requirements of what you need to do from a data privacy standpoint. And we've invested heavily here in compliance and all the certifications like SOC 2 Type 2, HIPAA for US healthcare, GDPR, et cetera. So, that's allowed us to go into large healthcare organizations and financial services companies and be able to automate against bots that are processing sensitive data. And then on top of that, while Windows is the dominant OS out there, there's still a lot of applications that are built on Linux. We run into Mac shops. And because of the nature of Python, we're able to operate natively on any of those target systems. And so that just gives our users a lot of flexibility when they're actually architecting and then deploying and running these bots. And then we didn't want to differentiate just around the functionality. We also wanted to change the total cost of ownership picture. And we've done that by introducing pure consumption-based pricing into the RPA space. And this provides a lot of benefit. Number one, you get elasticity. You can spin automations up and down on demand and only pay for the time that bot is actually running and adding value to your organization, and not paying anything when it's not running, right? So a lot of freedom there. So scaling up and down and also scaling out. I'll show you an example of a use case of a client that's taken advantage of the ability to take a very high volume, time sensitive workload and spread that out across multiple execution environments so they can do some parallel processing and better meet the needs of their business, right? And so a really powerful pricing model combined with what we think is very, very compelling tech and the best architecture that's out there in the market today. And so this is a real detailed view of our open source components. And as I mentioned, we're leveraging Python at the core of what we've done. And Python's being used all around the world, obviously. But we had to solve for a few things to make this automations achievable at scale. And we did that, number one, here at the foundation level with this open source project called RCC that is basically a way to containerize the bot and all of its dependencies and make it portable across your environments. And so that was the drawback of Python previously is, to run an automation on a machine somewhere, you had to make sure, does it have the right Python libraries? Do I have all the right infrastructure? Do I have everything set up that would allow it to run? RCC gets rid of all of that challenges and compartmentalizes everything that the bot needs to operate. That eliminates a lot of those fragility problems that we talked about as well. But then you have Python on top of that, right? And so millions of developers all around the world. My CEO likes to say every molecule in the universe has a Python library associated with it these days. And that just simply means that we can get to any kind of technology out there today, right? And we've seen it in our customer ecosystem of automating against everything from mainframes all the way up to modern, React-based web apps, right? And so it gives us a tremendous flexibility from that standpoint. But not everybody in the world is a Python developer, and we fully realize that, right? And so we layer a key open source project on top of it called Robot Framework to provide a layer of abstraction and make it accessible to anyone with basic IT scripting skills. Robot Framework, if you're not familiar with it, it's a robust open source community. This project came out of Nokia about 10 years ago, initially targeted at test automation and giving manual QA testers that didn't have any Python background a human readable syntax and a keyword driven approach to building out test automations. Our founders were heavily involved in that project. They saw the opportunity in RPA. They worked to make Robot Framework dual purpose for test automation as well as process automation. And we began extending those open source libraries for more RPA specific tasks, and we launched the company. And so that is really one of the keys behind all this. And what Robot Framework brings is these hundreds of libraries with thousands of these keywords that you can use in a composable way to build these bots out. And we've gotten feedback from organizations that are replacing first generation RPA tools like Blue Prism, UiPath, Automation Anywhere with Robocorp, who are telling us that it is now more intuitive for them to build using the Robot Framework keyword-driven syntax than it was using the low-code layer from Blue Prism or Automation Anywhere, et cetera, right? So it's a really powerful, really accessible solution. You do all of that development in a VS Code editor, whether it's Python or Robot Framework. And by the way, you mix and match the two. If you have Python skills, or looking to add them, number one, we're an easy on-ramp into the Python world. But if you have existing Python skills, you become super powerful because you can use the two in conjunction as you're building out automations. But we wanted to take it a step further from an accessibility standpoint. And so we rolled out recently a tool we call Automation Studio. This is free to use. It's out there. It's available today. It's technically still in beta. It only supports a subset of our automation libraries, but we're extending that really fast. What it provides is a low-code interface on top of the Robot Framework syntax. And so it's designed to help accelerate development because there's lots of keywords. It makes it really easy to find them and apply the right one. Number two, it makes it accessible to non-technical users. The difference here between us and other low-code RPA platforms is the output of Automation Studio is 100% code native. It generates actual Robot Framework syntax underneath the hood that you can toggle between the two views. And so what that enables us to do is really fit the tool to any persona that's out there and allow them to work in a collaborative fashion. And that was kind of the title of the presentation, was all around how do we blend citizen development, a low-code approach, and a pro-code approach. And that's what we're doing with Automation Studios. You can see here on the left just a quick screenshot of the low-code editor, where I'm able to do drag and drop and have a very simplistic interface to go do this. But if I get to a point as I'm building that I need to extend it somehow, I can easily give that to a professional developer that can toggle directly into the code view here and be able to start editing right there on the fly in VS Code, right? And extend that bot and work in a collaborative fashion with citizen developers and professional developers to ultimately build out these bots at scale. And so we're really excited about this. We're getting some great feedback from our user community on it. I encourage all of you to go check it out and let us know what you think. We think it's going to be a game changer in the RPA space. But when it comes to once the bots are built, by the way, most of our customer organizations, tie into their DevOps platform for version control of the bot coder. That you can do all of that in a very, very modern way, easily create reusable assets, et cetera. But the control room comes into play when you're orchestrating the bots. And this is where our consumption pricing kicks in around this, right? And again, it's based on runtime and nothing else, right? So it's purely like a cloud consumption model, but you can run the bots wherever you want, on-prem or in the cloud. And we've invested a lot in security. It was a security first mindset when we first designed Control Room. And so there's a high degree of governance built into the tool where you can separate bots and data and users. We tie in nicely to role-based access control, single sign-on systems, et cetera. This is how we're able to do business with large financial institutions, right? Because of the controls and security we have in the platform. The other thing is there's a really robust API and set of webhooks that allows you to trigger the bots in a variety of ways, as well as integrate into third-party technologies. In the demo I'll show you here in a second, we use the API to trigger a Robocorp bot to take action once something goes into forms flow, right? And we see that all the time with a variety of technologies out there, whether that's something like a Microsoft Power Automate that maybe moves something to SharePoint that can trigger our API to pick up that workload and then go orchestrate the automation of putting that data into an ERP system in the background, for example, as well as tie into AI ML tools for reading documents, et cetera. The other thing is, there's really detailed logging in the platform. It's really important to understand what these bots are doing from an auditability standpoint and also from a troubleshooting standpoint. And so users find it very compelling the way that we provide a detailed trace for every bot run of all the bot actions, as well as all of the data that flows through the bot. So if an error does occur as the bot is processing something, it's very fast to be able to go in and pinpoint what went wrong and know what you need to go fix, right? And it's very different than how they have to deal with that with first generation technology. And then, the final thing that people get really excited about is it's a combination of our functionality as well as our licensing model. It's this concept of parallel processing and dynamic scaling. These are fancy marketing terms for elasticity, right? It's the idea of being able to scale up and scale down as well as scale out, right? And so if I've got those large mission critical time sensitive workloads, I can architect the bot for maximum efficiency rather than worrying about this is the number of licenses I have to run a bot on. That concept goes completely away with us. And if you look at this, this is a conversion that we did earlier this year. This is a company called Emerson Electric. They're a Fortune 200 out of St. Louis, Missouri, that's migrating hundreds of bots that they built years ago on Blue Prism over to Robocorp. And we've seen tremendous results with that project. They're a great customer and a great case study. But this one in particular kind of highlights the power of some of those things we've been talking about. This was this process that they automated. It involves a large batch file of customer order information. And these are complex orders. They're an engineered to order organization. And so it's a really complex bill of materials. And that file comes in, but it has to be processed into Oracle within a 5-hour window because Oracle goes offline for maintenance that night. And so they were really struggling with meeting the SLA. They were faced with really having to expand their Blue Prism license environment to handle that workload, but they knew they'd have bad utilization on that investment because it was only a 5-hour period where they would use all that capacity. So when they found us and we started working with them and we implemented this use case with them, the bot now works like this. It comes in and it receives the file via the API in SharePoint. Once it hits SharePoint, our API is triggered. It picks up that workload. It then takes all that order information and the bot breaks it apart into individual customer line items and then pushes that down to 4 different virtual machines, each of which house 12 plus RDP sessions on it for processing that data in parallel into the screens in Oracle EBS. Now, the results are pretty compelling. You can see them there on the left. Number one, they got to 100% SLA compliance, and we're meeting the needs of the business really for the first time. They were struggling on Blue Prism to do this. But the key is they also reduced their TCO because their infrastructure got cut by 75%, and the bot's processing 3 times faster. And so it's making an impact downstream because this is customer order information. You're impacting a variety of financial metrics by doing this way. Now, this was all run on-prem. The Oracle EBS sits on-prem. They had to run this in their own data center because of that. But we support the same kinds of use cases, spinning things up ephemerally in cloud containers, for example, and be able to process that data there in the cloud and be able to tear it down dynamically once it's done. So your infrastructure costs are elastic, just like your RPA costs with Robocorp. And so this has been there's a really detailed case study on this out on our website. Glad to answer questions about it, but it's been a really compelling story. And so I'll talk a little bit about our relationship with AOT and FormsFlow.ai. The idea is, as you're using something like FormsFlow to be able to automate the input of data in that process, what happens to it once it gets there, right? How do I then go take action and automate it that last mile, maybe put it into a legacy system or a SaaS application, ERP, CRM, whatever, right? That's the idea of how we can complement the FormsFlow solution. And so I'll just show you that in action here. Michael and team were kind enough to put this together. And let me just hit play and I'll.
This is an example of Robocorp's RPA within FormsFlow AI's low-code development platform. In this integration example, a business application form is being filled out for government approval. The user fills out the business license form and submits it, which will trigger the robot in the cloud. The robot will take the information from the user form and run a cloud process to conduct a background check on the applicant. Robocorp lets you control all aspects of your robot workforce in the cloud, like triggering the robot, uploading and downloading robots, monitoring their status, and getting the results of their work by simple API calls. Here, we can see the robot in the cloud being triggered and beginning processing. The robot process has now been completed, and a task is created in FormsFlow AI, directing the auditor to download the PDF file generated by Robocorp to support the application audit. What would have been a repetitive manual task for the auditor has now been fully automated by Robocorp.
So that's a simple but very powerful kind of demonstration of what's possible with the technology. We see those audit kind of use cases quite often, right? Where a person is actually having to go in there and say, does the data in SAP match the data that's in Salesforce, and screenshot it and send it to the auditor for verification. Perfect use case for a bot. The thing I would add is, on the front end where the user is inputting that data into FormsFlow, that could have very well been automated as well, right? To take maybe that data comes out of Excel, et cetera, and be able to input that directly into FormsFlow and then take action on the back end. And so, lots of possibilities from an automation standpoint, as we discussed. So in wrap up, the whole idea with the partnership with AOT is to extend the functionality of FormsFlow to give you the opportunity to further automate your processes. We're all about providing both a no-code, a low-code, as well as a pro-code experience for the developers to make it accessible to people of all skill sets and personas, and be able to give you that composable approach to building these automations so that you can get to scale. But while giving you that speed and efficiency, but at a total cost of ownership that makes this accessible to companies of all sizes. One of the most exciting things for me here at Robocorp is, we're dealing with customers that are running our platform at scale and, Fortune 200 organizations around the world, but we're also being leveraged by, 40-person insurance brokers in Saskatchewan, small startups that are really just getting started and want a digital-first approach as they build out their organization. And that's exciting for us to watch, because our North Star with this thing has been all along, let's make RPA accessible to companies of all sizes. So with that, I won't bore you too much with us. We're easy to get in touch with. If you'd like to reach out, my contact information is here on the screen. You can also reach out to Michael, our partner AOT. We'd be glad to assist you any way that we can. And so with that, let me turn it over to Michael and see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Very well said. I appreciate everything you shared. Great stuff. I do have one question to begin with. We have a question: how do your customers address data privacy and security, given the bots may process sensitive data?
Yeah, good question. And we get that a lot, right? Because this is often the case with organizations. They're dealing with PHI or some other sensitive data type. And so there's a few ways we do it. Number one, with all the inbuilt security within the platform, so you feel comfortable using it. But also, that comment that I made about being able to run the bots wherever you need them to run. So while the orchestrator is in the cloud, you have complete control over where that bot runs and where the data does or does not go. And so you can handle that at a very detailed, fine-grained level as you build out the bots to stay in compliance with your needs and protect that sensitive data.
Thank you. Another question here is, Python has not traditionally been known to work in a Windows environment that uses SQL databases. What databases does a typical Robocorp client use to store, process, and application data?
Okay, that may get a little bit beyond me, honestly, but we are dealing with all kinds of Windows applications. Our logging is largely done in the cloud with different components there within the AWS environment, but you have the ability to store that locally as well in the database of your choice. When it comes to building automations, if you'll just go out to robocorp.com/docs, you can look at those libraries yourself and see some of the database libraries that we support as far as incorporating into your automations as well.
Thank you. And is your cloud service multi-tenanted? Is another question that's come up from the audience.
Yes, it is. It's built on AWS serverless, so it's multi-tenant, but like we talked about, right, there's separation across the organizations and the ability to control where that data goes. And so that's how, we're able to use the cloud solution to serve, Ally, as well as an Emerson to a Merck, on and on and on from our customer base, and be able to give them the full capability and assurity that the data is kept segregated.
Thank you. And I think this is probably the last question, unless we get a last-minute sneak in. Have you seen any use cases where folks are using Robocorp just for standing up cloud infrastructure, like deploying a VM, et cetera, to avoid infra as code?
We've had that come up recently. People are, I don't know what the right term is here, things like Ansible, et cetera, they're having challenges with it. I don't pretend to understand all the intricacies of it, but we have seen those use cases, and yes, they are out there. And so we've done some work with a couple of clients in that area.
Okay, thank you. And the last question, the one did pop in, we'll make this the last one. How do you accomplish interface to open on-prem infrastructure?
Interface to on-prem infrastructure. Well, there's a concept in our technology. It's called a workforce agent, and so this is a lightweight agent that you deploy down to the target system, and that's where control room pushes the bot code to execute on. Right, so that's the connection mechanism that sits on that on-prem infrastructure when you actually trigger the bot to run however you want to trigger it.
Thank you. And we did get one more, and I think we're ahead of schedule, so I'm going to continue if that's okay with you.
No problem.
What are you seeing as the split of traditional developers versus citizen developers using Robocorp?
Well, the low-code solution that we rolled out is fairly new. We launched that a few months ago. So the majority of our users use the VS Code extension. But, I remember distinctly when we were doing the project at Emerson in particular, we were having a large steering committee call. And there were people on there that were citizen developers in the Blue Prism world that had accounting backgrounds. And I asked one of the ladies on the call, and you always get nervous because you asking a question you don't know the answer to in a big audience. And I said, hey, how's the experience been? Have you been able to adapt and actually be able to use the technology effectively compared to what you did with Blue Prism? And that's where I got that answer where she said, look, it is more intuitive for us to do this. Had I ever used VS Code before? No, right? But through the training that she went through and a little bit of collaboration with her dev team, she was able to ramp up, and so was a number of members of her team to be able to go do that. So I think we really blurred the lines even before the low-code solution came out. I think, you know, once people got over the, it's an IDE, it's got a black screen and a little bit of code on it, right? Once they got over the hump on that, we're seeing quote unquote former citizen developers, you know, building bots in a VS Code extension, right? Now the low-code layer is going to make that even easier though.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it very much. That's the end of our questions, and it looks like the end of our session. I want to say thank you to everyone that's joined. Thank you to Chris for your excellent presentation today. There's more presentations tomorrow. Keep an eye out on your inbox for invites from Zoom for tomorrow's sessions, and we look forward to seeing you folks tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.